Oh, hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster. Welcome back to another episode where I answer fashion questions from you. We got some barn burners today. Let's get to it.
Do you think fashion will ever be able to create enough impactful solutions to outpace fast fashion?
Okay, so on the issue of sustainability, I think a lot of this comes down to what people are going to be willing to buy. If you look at someone and say, like, this shirt costs $9, this shirt costs $180, which shirt do you want to buy? Most people are going to go for the $9 one. So I think there just has to be a huge shift in people's priorities. Even if that just means that, like, people are more willing to buy things secondhand, which is how I get the vast majority of my clothes. I don't know if you noticed or not, but the Issei jumper is, she's not new. And the guy that made these for me, Tickoff on Instagram, these are pretty cool. Let me show you. He sources old Levi's and then just does a really specific dye technique to get this really cool marbling effect. That's a really cool way of using old clothes to make them new and relevant again. Because to be honest, these look great. I love them. So yeah, again, it's just a shift in priorities. Hey Bliss, I didn't have a question, but I wanted to tell you that your Patreon has changed my life. It is the greatest thing ever. I am so pleased that I have set aside a couple of dollars each month to keep this channel running. That wasn't a real question. Join the Patreon today, please. Get on my Patreon.
How do you accept that you can make a difference when so much already exists?
I assume this question is talking about in fashion design? Okay. Look, people like Yves Saint Laurent and Cristobal Balenciaga, who literally changed the course of how people dress, I don't think any of those people set out to do that. Anyone who is a creative maker of things, and so that applies to all artists, and honestly this kind of even applies to scientists, all of those people are just saying, I want to do my own thing, I want to have my voice with this, and my goal ultimately, I hope that in my lifetime, I can take the circle of what we already know and move it slightly outwards. I want to contribute just a tiny piece. And occasionally you get rolling on your path and you eventually end up saying, oh my gosh, like what if we did ready to wear instead of everything being made to measure? That is what Yves Saint Laurent did. And then you end up changing the way that people dress. I don't think anyone sets out to do that. And so ultimately, I guess I'm saying don't put too much pressure on yourself to be like a life-changing force in the world of fashion. Do your own thing. And just continue to plug away, follow your own voice, develop your voice, and then with time, you will eventually, hopefully, be able to move the sphere of what we know slightly outward. You can do it. I believe in you.
Book recommendations for learning about 90s archival.
So I have two big suggestions here. One is going to be this book called Wear Me, Fashion and Graphic Interaction. I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about. Like if you mean like old number 9 stuff and like undercover and things, then this might not help a ton. I think there is a little bit of that in here, but mostly it is about like the evolution of graphics and t-shirts. A lot of this centers around stuff that was happening in the 90s. A lot of times with archive Instagram pages and stuff, they're more painting you a picture of their interpretation of what the 90s was like. And we might also mention that many of the people who run those archive pages were either very small children or not born yet in the 90s. So it's always good to immerse yourself in resources that will give you actual insight into what the aesthetics of the 90s were actually like, because they either came out in the 90s or they are created by someone who was not only alive, but a fully functional adult and was keeping up with art and music and stuff in the 90s. Another big resource for anything archival fashion is archivepdf.net. They have a ton of scans of all different kinds of fashion books, most of which are completely out of print or impossible to find. They have one of the best resources of any website that I've ever seen. It's invaluable.
Are Margiela Tabi shoes comfortable? Do they splay the fuck out of one's toes?
Well, okay, wait. I'm answering these separately. Are Margiela Tabi shoes comfortable? Yes. They are way more comfortable than I thought any heels possibly could be. I have the 2-inch Margiela Tabi boots, which is the maximum height for dudes. But at the same time, I don't know if I would wear them many days in a row, because eventually, yeah, you do start to get that little like kind of like spasmy feeling right here between like your big toe and your second biggest toe. It doesn't like hurt. It just more feels like, oh, if I do this a lot, I think that will eventually start to hurt. Like when I went to Fashion Week, I was wearing them like 80% of the time. But then like when I'm at home, I might wear them once every other week. I'm not a podiatrist, but like I don't think you're like building up any long-term damage to your feet by wearing tabbies occasionally.
How do you analyze fashion as art? Is there a wrong answer? Can it stem from emotions?
Okay, so this depends. I know, I hate it when people say it depends also. I'm sorry. If you're taking in art as a self-reflective exercise, then that's great. Yeah, like it can stem from your emotions. All that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I would say that if other people are going to be involved in your interpretation, then it probably needs to not just stem from your emotions. Comment down below if I misunderstood your question here. But imagine if you were watching a runway analysis by me, and at one point there was someone walking on the runway in a certain outfit, and I said, this really reminds me of something that my uncle wore when I was 7. It was like this goofy thing for Halloween, and like it wasn't something that he would wear normally, but I just remember it was really impactful because I got a lot of candy that year. Anyway, this just looks a lot like that. If you're just very like dialed into your own emotions and like your memories and your feelings about something, you should maybe consider journaling, because there's nothing wrong with remembering those things and kind of reliving them and like really getting caught up in them. But ultimately, when you're doing an interpretation of art, that interpretation is partly so that you yourself can understand, but it has to be through the framework of, is this going to be useful for other people? So it's not truly subjective. I mean, a lot of analysis of art honestly comes through PhD candidates who are having to peer review all of their stuff. And academic peer reviews, especially for art interpretation, they're pretty brutal. You have to really be able to back up everything you're saying. Your argument needs to be airtight. But if you really want to know more about analyzing fashion as art, I have a whole episode that's just about that. I'm probably going to end up turning that into a series where we do a new installation of that like once a year as I learn more about doing this myself. But yeah, if you want to check that out, the link is somewhere here-ish. Excuse me. This isn't really related, but check this out. I just got this book. I don't buy a lot of fashion books new, but while I was in Paris for Fashion Week, I was like, you know what? I am going to buy a brand new fashion book. And I'm so happy I did. I'm so excited.
Do you think knitwear is niche?
Oh, that's such a good question. Why don't you ask my friend Icy Miyake if knitwear is niche? I really thought a couple of years ago that his name actually was pronounced Icy Miyake, and I made a fool of myself at opening ceremony. Do you guys have any Icy Miyake? To my credit, though, the guy working at the store was like, it's actually pronounced Issey Miyake. Diamonds on my pleats, call that Icy Miyake. Bars! This is my mom's day off. She's like somewhere in the house right now being like, what is wrong with my son?
Is knitwear niche?
No, I don't think it is. There was actually an article in Business of Fashion recently that talked about the fact that knitwear is like this exploding market right now. I think it's on the rise. But since it is on the rise, let's remind everyone that knitwear should almost never be made of cotton, polyester, and certainly not both. You want natural fibers for knitwear, and you would like something besides cotton. Cotton just usually means that they're cutting corners. Wool is more expensive to work with in most cases than cotton is, and so if they're making the sweater out of cotton, that just usually means that the quality is going to be bad overall. And polyester just means it is a cheap garment of clothing. I mean, there are maybe a few companies that I would trust to make a sweater out of polyester. Like, I mean, if I saw a Comme des Garçons sweater that was made out of polyester, I would assume that something interesting was going on there. Like if Acronym made a sweater out of polyester, I would assume that they knew what they were doing. And also, I mean, wool, to be honest, is like a miracle textile. It's kind of crazy how much versatility there is to wool. I mean, like if you have something like, hang on. There's gonna be too much white in this. It's gonna blow out my skin tone. But if you look at like blankets that are like this, these like polyester things, the really like fuzzy ones that are really cheap and they're everywhere at like Target and Walmart and stuff. Have you ever noticed that like if you're super, super cold, you like reach for those and you're like, oh, this is gonna be perfect. This is exactly what I need. I'm freezing. And then you put it on and you get warm really quickly. But if you notice, like if you stay under one, if you stay really wrapped up in one, you start to sweat really quickly. Polyester provides insulation. It just doesn't have any breathability to it. And so the warmth is like this very weird microwavy kind of warmth. If you're trapped in it, if it's a sweater, you need something that is going to be warm and insulating, but also breathable. And that way you're not just sweating a whole bunch and then you're even colder and you're miserable because you're covered in sweat. Make wise purchases with your sweaters, please. Time for one more.
Instagram makes me ultra stressed. What if I delete it for a year? Will I miss a lot of upcoming fashion stuff?
Here's the deal. You should start as early as you possibly can, setting up boundaries in your own life and limiting the things that make you worried and stressed. And I mean, no, you're really not going to miss out on anything. I have for a super long time preached this message that like Instagram is one of the worst ways of learning about and keeping up with fashion. If you took a year off of Instagram and then you just said, I'm going to listen to a bunch of fashion podcasts and I'm going to read a bunch of fashion books, you are going to learn so much more more about fashion, it is going to freak you out how much more you are learning. And it'll freak you out even more after you start learning from those books and podcasts and stuff. And then you look back on your time on Instagram and think like, what are some things that I've actually learned about fashion from Instagram? And then you can't think of anything. I mean, really, like you will be so much better off. If your goal is to learn about fashion and to reduce your own stress level, it sounds like, just get rid of it. Go get a copy of Wear Me, Fashion and Graphics Interaction. Go buy Viv's new book. Go buy Terry Mugler. This one's really cool, Fashionable Selby. He just like goes around to different designers' studios and like records their processes. Get out of town. That's the coolest. Way cooler than Instagram. Go do stuff like that. Geez, wow. Thank you so much for joining me. This has honestly been crazy. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Okay. I guess we'll see each other soon. Yeah. Stop. Are you going to join my Patreon? Stop. No, you hang up first. Okay, bye. Could you please point me to the Icy Miyake section?